Imagine the unimaginable. What would it mean if Vladimir Putin were to use a nuclear bomb? Let's delve into the immediate aftermath of such a catastrophic event. The first and most heartbreaking consequence would be the loss of countless innocent lives. The power of a nuclear bomb is unlike any other weapon. Its devastating force is capable of annihilating an entire city within seconds. The widespread destruction would be unfathomable, reducing buildings, infrastructure, and everything in its path to rubble. But the devastation wouldn't stop there. The environmental damage would be profound and long-lasting. The blast would generate an enormous amount of heat, igniting fires that would burn for weeks, exacerbating the environmental catastrophe. Alongside the physical destruction, a nuclear detonation would release harmful radiation into the environment. This radiation contamination would render the impacted region uninhabitable for generations to come. The land, once teeming with life, would become a barren wasteland. The radiation would permeate the soil, infiltrate water sources, and poison the air. Plant and animal life would perish in the affected area, and the ecological balance would be disrupted, perhaps irreversibly. The radiation would also have a devastating impact on human health, causing radiation sickness in the short term and potentially leading to an increase in cancer and genetic diseases in the long term. Nearby regions and countries wouldn't be spared either. The fallout, a deadly mix of radioactive particles, would be carried by wind and rain, spreading the contamination far beyond the initial blast site. This could lead to further loss of life, health issues, and environmental damage in areas far removed from the epicenter of the explosion. The immediate impact would be devastating, causing immense loss and suffering. This scenario paints a grim picture of the consequences of a nuclear bomb. It's a stark reminder of the power and danger of nuclear weapons, and the importance of preventing their use at all costs. In the wake of such an event, the long-term effects would be far-reaching and profound. The immediate aftermath of a nuclear strike is just the tip of an iceberg of devastation. The lingering aftermath would paint a grim portrait of the future, a future shrouded in shadows of loss, despair, and perpetual suffering. Imagine a world where an entire region is blanketed in an invisible shroud of deadly radiation. The air, the water, the soil, all contaminated, rendering the land uninhabitable for countless generations. The health repercussions would be severe and ongoing. Acute radiation sickness would claim many lives, while others would grapple with a lifetime of health complications, including increased risk of cancer and genetic mutations affecting future generations. The economic impact would be equally catastrophic. The affected region's economy would likely collapse, triggering a ripple effect that could plunge the nation, and potentially even the global economy, into a recession. The cost of rehabilitation and recovery would be astronomical, further deepening the economic pitfall. The social fabric of the society would be torn apart. Millions would be displaced, forced to abandon their homes and livelihoods, becoming refugees in their own country or across borders. This mass displacement could lead to tensions and conflicts, both internally and with neighboring countries affected by fallout. And let's not forget about the psychological trauma. The survivors would be haunted by the horrors of the explosion, living with the fear and anxiety of an uncertain future. The mental health crisis following such an event would be an epidemic in itself. The environmental toll would be colossal. The explosion would wreak havoc on the local ecosystem, causing a significant loss of biodiversity. The fallout could also contribute to global climate change, exacerbating the existing environmental crises. Long after the initial explosion, the suffering would continue. The future would look bleak. It's a future we must strive to prevent, emphasizing the importance of diplomatic relations, international cooperation, and the pursuit of nuclear disarmament. In the game of nuclear warfare, there are no winners, only survivors. Now consider the man who pressed the button. What would happen to Putin and his family? The fallout of such an action wouldn't just impact the world at large. It would have profound and personal consequences for Vladimir Putin himself. One of the most immediate repercussions would likely be international criminal charges. The use of a nuclear weapon would constitute a war crime, and the International Criminal Court, among others, would almost certainly seek to hold him accountable. If Putin were to unleash such destruction, he would become a pariah on the world stage. He would be viewed as a war criminal, and his legacy would be forever tarnished. The international community would not stand idly by. They'd seek justice, and Putin could find himself facing a trial, much like those who have committed atrocities in the past. But it's not just Putin. His family would also face the backlash. In a world shocked and angered by such a calamitous act, personal safety concerns for his family would skyrocket. As the family of the man who brought about such a catastrophe, they might find themselves in the crosshairs of that global outrage. And then there's the question of refuge. Where would they go? Given the scale of the act and the international condemnation that would follow, it's hard to imagine many places where they could find sanctuary. They might have to seek refuge in a country willing to overlook the egregious act, but such options would likely be few and far between. It's a bleak picture, but it's one that underscores the enormity of the decision to use a nuclear weapon. The repercussions wouldn't just be global, they'd be deeply personal. The act of using a nuclear weapon would not only devastate countless lives, but also bring about dire consequences for Putin and his family. But what about Russia, the nation that would be held responsible? What would become of its people? Well, in the aftermath of such an event, Russia would likely face severe sanctions from the international community. These sanctions could cripple Russia's economy, leaving it in a state of financial ruin. The country's currency could plummet, leading to inflation and economic instability. Imports and exports would be severely affected, disrupting supply chains and leading to shortages of essential goods. The cost of living would skyrocket and the average Russian citizen would feel the pinch. But economic sanctions are just one part of the story. The international community would likely isolate Russia diplomatically as well. Countries around the globe would sever ties, close embassies, and recall diplomats. Russia could find itself a pariah state, cut off from the rest of the world. What about the Russian people themselves? Well, they would bear the brunt of these sanctions and the resulting economic hardship. Jobs would be lost, savings would evaporate, and the cost of basic necessities would rise. Poverty and unemployment could skyrocket, leading to a social crisis. The people could face a dire situation where they are struggling to make ends meet. And then there's the potential displacement. Given the destructive power of a nuclear bomb, many Russians could be forced from their homes, becoming refugees in their own country. They would be left to rebuild their lives from scratch, in a nation crippled by economic and diplomatic isolation. The psychological impact on the Russian people would also be immense. The knowledge that their leader had caused such destruction could lead to widespread despair, anger, and a sense of betrayal. The social fabric of the nation could be torn apart, leading to civil unrest and potentially even a revolt against the leadership. In the end, the Russian people would pay a heavy price for their leader's actions. The fallout for Russia and its citizens after a nuclear detonation would be catastrophic, a chilling reminder of the devastating consequences of nuclear warfare. And what of the world? How would it respond to such an unthinkable act? One word: condemnation. The global community would stand together, united in its denouncement of such a heinous act. Nations far and wide would express their outrage, their sorrow, their disbelief, and yet the condemnation would only be the beginning. The nuclear-armed nations of the world would find themselves on high alert. Fearful of a chain reaction, they might consider a nuclear retaliation. The very thought sends shivers down the spine. A full-scale nuclear war, a mutual destruction on an unimaginable scale. It's a grim picture, one that underscores the devastating potential of nuclear weapons and the importance of their control. In the midst of this chaos, the international community would not stand idle. Organizations like the United Nations would spring into action. They would swiftly condemn the act, yes, but their work wouldn't end there. Their mission would be to prevent further nuclear escalation, to stop the dominoes from falling. Diplomatic efforts would be made to de-escalate the situation, to find a peaceful resolution amidst the devastation. It would be a monumental task, a testament to the power of diplomacy and the human spirit. But the damage caused by the initial nuclear strike would be irreversible. Regions contaminated by radiation, innocent lives lost, an environment forever scarred. The world would be left to grapple with the aftermath, with the reality of what one nuclear bomb can do. The world would be forever altered, mourning the loss of life and grappling with the long-lasting damage caused by the use of nuclear weapons. But amidst the grief and destruction, there would also be a lesson. A reminder of the catastrophic consequences of nuclear warfare, of the importance of international cooperation, diplomacy, and nuclear disarmament. It's a lesson we must never forget.